Today we'll be knitting a lined lace hat. You can knit a lace hat that has no lining, and you can knit a lined hat without lace. But to get a warm winter hat, it's a great idea to combine the two techniques. This is part of a long strip of hats that I'm knitting. The video series is loosely based on my Stripping for Charity book and is part of the Corona Hat Challenge that I'm doing with my Corona group on Facebook. All the hats we're making are 18 inches in circumference, which is a child-sized hat. All require number 4 yarn, getting 4 stitches, 6 rows per inch on a bulky machine. That's the stockinette gauge. Here's how the work proceeds. We start with the lining color and don't use any cast on at all, just leave a long tail. We'll eventually gather that first row on the long tail and it will become the top of the crown on the inside of the hat. With the lining color, knit 34 normal stitch size or main stitch size rows, followed by 8 tight rows, 2 to 3 whole numbers tighter to make the brim a little more snug fitting. Change colors to the color for the outside of the hat, knit 8 rows at the smaller stitch size, then 4 at the main stitch size. Then we'll work lace transfers every other row 3 times, finish with 30 rows at main stitch size, and eventually gather those off. Just leave a yarn tail to do that with. Finishing is like the other hats in the series, except that we gather both ends, not just one. And when I do hats like this, I usually like to tie the yarn tails together at the crown to keep it stable, and sew the edges of the work together, creating a center back seam. Finishing is covered in more detail in the initial video in this series. As you join me, I've already completed the lining, 34 rows at main stitch size, or a little refinement is main stitch size -1, so that it's just a touch smaller than the outside of the hat. Then 8 tight rows for the lining part of the brim. I've changed to the exterior color, knitted 8 tight rows and 4 main stitch size rows. And now it's time to begin the lace. I'm going to demonstrate with a really simple pattern. Every 5th stitch is going to move to the needle to the right. We'll do this by hand, and we will do it every 2 rows. But on the following rows, we'll skew 1 stitch farther to the right. So in other words, stitch 5 moves this time, stitch 6 moves next time, stitch 7 moves the following time. We'll do 3 transfers in all, which will create the diagonal lines. Each set of transfers is done on every 5th stitch. If an edge stitch is scheduled to either get transferred or to receive a transfer, don't do it. Skip that, because that will interfere with the seam. After the transfers, all of the empty needles need to remain in work, and we can make sure of that and also make it easier to knit off the doubled stitches by bringing all the needles forward, knitting back from hold for 2 rows, and repeating the transfer operation as described. After the 3rd set of transfers, knit 28 plain rows, and then, leaving a long yarn tail, scrap off. We'll gather the crowns and do the seaming once the strip is off of the machine. By the way, in the final wrap-up video, you will see a parade of all the hats I've made once they're completed. This will give you a good idea of the kind of possibilities open to you in strip knitting. It's quite a lot more than you might imagine. Although we've been working exclusively on a bulky, the Stripping for Charity hat book covers all average gauges of machine, by which I mean standard gauge at 4.5 or 5 millimeters between needles, mid gauge at 6 to 7 millimeters, and bulky at 8 to 9 millimeters between the needles. Here's the table of contents showing what's in the book, and the sizes covered are from newborn to extra large adults. That's for the bottom 8 pattern. The Hats by the Yard pattern uses absolutely any yarn or machine, but only covers sizes 19 to 22 inches in circumference. In the book, the kind of hat we just made is in Chapter 8. They're called peekaboo lace hats in the book. Here are some other lace designs that I include in the book, and also, of course, anytime that you can chart something that will make a simple outline, such as a heart or a diamond, that can be made with this style of lace.